What's up, my friend? Welcome back to a brand new video, and today we are going to take a look at a comparison between the Cinematic Studio series and Cinesamples. So, first of all, these get lumped in together in conversation quite a lot. First of all, I mean, they have very similar initials, CS, right? And second of all, they just have this very similar approach to sampling the orchestra. I mean, Cinematic Studio Series and Cinesamples, right? They literally have cinematic in their name to some degree. And so they've sampled the entire orchestra. Well, Cinematic Studio Series, at the time of this recording, does not have their percussion library just yet, but they do have the other sections. And so we'll take a look at comparing each section here. And I want to show you some of the pros and cons of each, share with you why I would use one over the other, show some workflow differences, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll get a sense of maybe which section of the orchestra is best for you from each developer. You might decide one is just maybe more suited for specific purposes than others, and you can let me know if you have any questions about that. And of course, because these are the two companies that I typically recommend and use on a regular basis, if you're interested in knowing more details about these libraries and interested in my other recommendations as well, not just the orchestra, but also piano libraries, jazz libraries, ethnic libraries, I've compiled all of that information into what I call my sample library buyer's guide. So if you want to click the first link down below, it's a free guide that you can download right away. And again, it contains all my recommendations. I've also included the prices and the utility of each library so you can understand what you're getting into and if I personally recommend them or not. Okay, so you can grab that anytime as my free gift to you for checking out this video today. All right, so let's dive in and start with the strings. Strings are the backbone of the orchestra. Let's go. So let's start with Cinesamples, first of all. So in terms of their orchestral stuff, they typically break them down into the core library and the pro library. The core library typically encompasses about 80% of the traditional orchestra and articulations you might need for most purposes. And then their pro libraries are meant as not really expansion packs, but just additional content that can fill out the rest of the orchestra that the core libraries do not, if that makes sense. So starting with the strings, you can see here that it has quite a simple interface. We have the different mixer presets, mic positions. You have the mic positions right here as well that you can mute and solo. And the Dennis Sands mix by default loads up, which is really nice because then you don't have to go through and figure out your own mic positioning if you don't want to, you know? They also give you monophonic and polyphonic legato, which is a really cool feature to have in the Cinesamples libraries. And then, of course, you can map this a little differently if you want to. But one thing that's cool is that the articulations patch basically contains shorts and legato in one patch. Okay, and without the need for key switching, all you need to do is press down the sustain pedal to trigger legato. So what I'll do is I'll play a little bit, I'll play some of these shorts, and then I'll play some legato, and then I'll share some thoughts with you. So here are some of the shorts. Okay, so you can hear first impressions, very, very bright sound. It was recorded in the Sony scoring stage in LA, so there's a very cinematic, big sound to it as well, but not overly reverberant, which is really nice. And I think the Dennis Sands mix for me, I use about like 95% of the time when I'm using Cinesamples libraries. The sound for me is just that good. So yeah, it's a little bit interesting though, the way the mapping works. By default, it loads up with the velocity sensitive nature of the library. It really comes through for the shorts. So the lighter you play, the shorter the note value. Okay, so like the staccatissimo are when you play very, very lightly, and then when you play medium or with more velocity, then it lengthens to a regular staccato, for example. And then when you play really hard, it goes to a marcato sample, so even longer. And then the mod wheel actually controls the dynamics. So at the very bottom, you hear those really quiet dynamic layers, and as you push it up, you get louder and louder. So if you want a short, really short note, but really loud, then you push the mod wheel up, but you play very lightly. Whereas if you want it really loud and very long, or a longer marcato, then you can push the mod wheel up and play pretty hard. If you want legato, then you basically press down the sustain pedal and you play legato with your hand. That's it. So that's a pretty interesting way of mapping, pretty unique to Cinesamples, I would say, as far as I'm aware. One other thing they have is Cinestring's runs, which is basically a runs library inspired by Holly Woodwinds, which they have up here. So they have scales and trills. They also have tonal and atonal rips and runs as well. And then they have split patches here. But I like to use this library quite a lot for runs and textures, basically in combination with Holly Woodwinds. They are quite effective for me. So let me just play a few of these for you here. So I just love this library. It's tempo synced as usual with most other orchestral libraries that have some sort of speed element to it. And it's quite flexible. I mean, yes, I think it is only violins, but that makes sense because the lower you go, the more muddy the sounds start to get when you play with a faster tempo. So violins are typically very agile, very light instruments, so they can play very fast. And because the way sound works, the faster you play in the higher registers, the more clear it's going to be anyway. So you don't have to worry too much about muddiness here. So yeah, this library is really cool because you can toggle between the different tonic notes, right? The roots, then different scale types up here. Do you want to sync to the downbeat? How fast do you want the runs to be? And then you can say double time, half time, or manual, right, for the speed of the run. So a lot of flexibility there and just really good for general decoration. I think it's meant to be used in complement with Cinestring's core there. Now, moving on to Cinematic Studio Strings, it's a beautiful library, but this library really excels in the legato, whereas I think most people think of Cinestrings as really gritty, having a really good short articulation, but when it comes to the legato, it's a little bit less fluid, let's say, as compared to Cinematic Studio Strings. So let me just play a bit of this legato and show you what I mean here from CSS. So that's just a quick look at Cinematic Studio Strings. And I really quickly want to point out how nice it is basically to have all the articulations contained within one patch. So if you take a look at the folder structure here in the library, it really just comes with the 7 patches, right? And 2 of them are just ensemble patches. So you have first, second violins, violas, cellos, and basses. And then when you load them in, all 8 articulations are included here in the very middle. And within each one that you click, you have variations on those, right? So the staccato, you have spiccato, staccatissimo, so on, basically as different short lengths of notes, right? Whereas for Cinesamples, it's a little bit more complicated. I mean, the articulations patch does have the shorts and the longs, but that's basically it. So if you want to load in a different articulation, let's see here. The core library also has pizzicato and col legno, which is great. And it also has harmonics. And I believe, let me see, is there anything else here? Yeah, there's also like a trill and tremolo here as well. So it basically has most of the articulations that CSS does as well, but it's just separated into different patches. Might be a pro, might be a con for you, but you can kind of decide what workflow you prefer here. And in terms of sound, you can hear how CSS is quite a bit darker. It's a little less bright, right? So you might want to use it more for those romantic golden age scores, whereas for the Cinestrings library, it's a lot more Hollywood sounding right out of the box. A lot more modern sounding in a way, whereas the Cinematic Studio series sounds a little bit more not romantic, but I guess more mellow in a way, right? A little darker. So you might have to use a little bit of EQ to brighten it up to kind of get it to match the Cinestrings and other Cinesamples libraries as well. Okay, let's move on to the woodwind. So let me just play maybe the oboe. I'm going to compare the oboe here. So we're just going to play the sustains or the legato and the shorts, and then same idea here with CSW as well. So here is the Cinewind's core oboe. So first impressions, if if we're comparing the oboes back to back, is the Cinematic Studio Woodwinds one sounds a lot more emotional. It has a lot more passion in it overall, and the vibrato is a little bit more immediate to me. So for Cinewind's core, the oboe here, the vibrato takes a little bit more time to come in, so it's a little bit more progressive. But on the other hand, the tone itself is a little bit more strident, so it seems to cut through the mix a little bit better, which is a common case with the Cinesamples libraries anyway. You can hear those instruments really clearly, whereas for CSW, the tone is very full and rich, but overall, it's not quite as bright as Cinewind's, right? But if you want this really passionate, soulful type of legato performance, then I think CSW really excels in that, and the legato for me is really, really good. Whereas for Cinewinds, they've kind of, it is an older library in general. Like all of the Cinesamples libraries are generally older than Cinematic Studio series. So the programming and, the general scripting is not going to be quite as advanced, let's say. But the tone itself can't really be beat. I really just enjoy how clean and how beautiful the Cinesamples libraries sound. The one thing about the CSW, though, is that some of the phasing can be a little bit evident, especially if you're riding on the crossfade just between those dynamic layers. So you just want to be careful after you record in, let's say, a string line, but mainly woodwind line because they're so exposed. You just want to be careful to massage the modulation so you don't really cross right at that point where you're going between those two dynamic layers, or it can create that phasing effect. So just be careful there. But yeah, beautiful instruments overall. Okay, moving on to Cinebrass. Now, this is, I think, where Cinesamples really excels, is in their brass lineup. And because they recorded in MGM Scoring Stage in LA, they have a really great brass experience, you know? And this room in particular really responds really well to brass. So let me play the 6 horns articulation patch from Cinebrass Core. There's also Cinebrass Pro, which has a lot more solos, a lot more dynamics, and fills out the rest of the brass section. Then they have Cinebrass Sonore, which is a melodic focus library. They have the descant horn, which I'll also play. They have also Horns of the Deep for the low brass. So brass, 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 lots of brass. And you can kind of see why after we play this. Here we go. So good, so beautiful. Yes, the legato is a little bit sluggish, you could say, but overall the sound itself, I really, really love it. Let's move on to Sonore, which is a newer library compared to Core and Pro. This legato is a lot smoother, but it really only goes up to the mezzo forte, forte dynamic, doesn't really reach the fortissimo spectrum there. So let's have a quick listen to the horns legato from Cinebrass Sonore. There we go. Very warm, very buttery, but very resonant as well, right? It really just sings through the hall beautifully. Here's a listen to the descant horn legato. I mean, that's the best descant horn I've heard from the sample library. I really love it. Again, just, yeah, like brass sounds so good in this room. The woodwinds and the strings sounded a little strident, a little bit harsh, but the brass sounds bright and warm at the same time. It's a really hard way to describe how it sounds, but it's just really lovely. Okay, let's move on to Cinematic Studio Brass. So a very compact library here. Let me quickly show you the structure. So yes, we have the solo instruments, we have the horn, we have the trombone, trumpet, and tuba, and bass trombone as well, which is cool. And then we have sections, so 2 trombones, 2 trumpets, and 4 horns as well for a horn ensemble. And then they have the full ensemble patch here as well. So much, much simpler. Let's just have a listen here to the 4 horns legato from CSB. So one big plus for CSB is the repetition shorts are really short. They're actually really short. And you can even hear the tail cutting off immediately after the note plays so that it makes room for the next note to come in right after the first repetition, which is really cool too. And again, all the articulations are included right here in the middle. So you get a really easy kind of GUI to look at. So you can choose between muted, you can do flutter tonguing, trills, double tongue, and marcato and rips, and so on and so forth. Let's hear the solo horn really quickly here as well. So whereas the legato for CSB, I think definitely wins, I think the sound for Cinebrass wins. So people ask like which is better. In my opinion, I would say have both if possible, just for that reason alone. Having a great sound and having great articulation and playability are both wonderful things to have. And especially if you want to layer them together to create an even beefier, warm kind of sound, then this is a great opportunity to have them. Then moving on to percussion, again, Cinematic Studio Series at the moment does not have a percussion library, so Cinesamples automatically wins on that front. And I mean, Cineperc really is my go-to percussion library anyway for all traditional percussion at the moment. So let me play this for you a little bit. I think percussion also sounds really good in this MGM stage too. Really clear, really full, really resonant. And this library, it's hard to find a percussion library more comprehensive than Cineperc at its price as well. I think it's like $700-800, and you basically have 4 libraries in one. So it's like the core library with the traditional instruments there, Pro, which has the drum kit and a whole bunch of other ones, Epic, which is basically a whole bunch of ensembles played in a really intense, epic manner, and the auxiliary percussion for all the rest. So for percussion, traditional percussion, Cineperc is my go-to. And I don't have Cinestring Solo, so I can't compare that in this video, unfortunately. But if I do get that, I will do a separate video comparing Cinestring Solo and CSSS, which would be fun. But I also thought I could compare the pianos really quickly. So here's Cinematic Studio Piano, and then I'm going to play Cine Piano as well. So here we go. So that is the Cinematic Studio Piano out of the box. Okay. And let's have a quick listen to Cine Piano out of the box as well. I'm just using the regular Cine Piano patch, although it also has the classical patch, the cinematic patch, and the Rock Studio Grand. So here is the Cine Piano patch. So Cinepiano really is my go-to piano. Again, that really warm, full piano sound is really good for that kind of yeah, concert hall sound, but it also has a lot of detail in there as well. It's just a perfect blend of far and close. So I get that detail of the room, but I also get the detail of the instrument itself as well, which is really pretty. And again, if I want a slightly different sound, I can always go to one of these other patches. And Cinemax Studio Piano has a really cool effects patch as well, which we didn't hear today. But yeah, that is a quick overview of these developers. So hopefully that gave you a bit of an insight into, you know, my thoughts about these libraries and these developers. Both do wonderful, wonderful work. And again, if possible, grab both because they offer slightly different things, but yeah, they have kind of complementary palettes that can really help you with your productions, I would say. So if you could let me know maybe which library is your favorite, which developer do you prefer from listening to this video? Do you have a specific library from each maybe that you prefer? And let me know why as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Personally, I love both. If I had to choose one library from each developer in terms of the different sections, I would say CSS for strings, CSW for woodwinds, Cinebrass for brass. So that includes Quorum Pro and Sonore and stuff. And then, of course, Cineperk for perk because I have, that's the only percussion library we have from these two developers. Cinepiano for piano. Yeah, so it's a nice mix of both, I would say. And again, they have their pros and cons both. But it depends on the style of music you're trying to write, the overall like vibe you're going for, right? And the samples do different things, obviously. So you just want to be aware of that. But anyway, that's a quick overview. Thank you again so much for watching. And again, if you want to check out my other recommendations, not just, you know, these developers, but the other ones that I use as well, then definitely check out the sample library buyer's guide down below. It's totally free. And again, it's my gift to you for checking out this video today. And I hope it helps you. So thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next one and take care, my friends. Bye-bye.